I'm really very excited, like, when Dr. Thien called me up, like, about this webinar and asked whether if I would be able to share my experience on this topic, like, unlocking potential of young women in academic leadership. I would, before I start, like, I would like to just, like, say thank you, like, Prof. Abi, for setting the expectation so high, like, for me, like, to start to share these topics. Okay, so I have actually started, like, listening in, like, to the talk, like, that Prof. Karen gave, like, just now, and also, like, Prof. Abi. And it was really very exciting listening to the presentation and also reading all the comments and chats, like, in the chat room. So it's really very interactive and inspiring, like, at the same time. I think, like, Prof. Karen and also Prof. Abi has already set the scene very well, particularly on the topic, like, on gender equity, gender equality, and all the psychological state, the well-being of women in the academic, in the workforce particularly. So for my part, so I do not need to actually go through all of this, but actually, like, I will focus very much, like, in sharing my experience, like, in leading Young Scientist Academy as a young woman. If you please allow me to still use the word young over here, like, in particularly in leadership, what I've learned, like, my self-reflection and things that I think would probably benefit the other young women out there that you could actually, like, practice. Okay. So, I have actually get, like, this question a lot, actually many times, like, particularly even during interview by the media or in any webinars, like, related on academic or research. I often get this question, like, how do you manage your time and balance your life, like, between family and career? To that level that I feel that it's quite a bit, like, bothering, that I start thinking, why is this question being always, like, posed to me, like, asking about, like, how do I spend time with my family, being, like, the need, like, to play so many different roles, like, the need, like, to spend time and effort, like, in leading Young Scientist Network, as well as, like, doing research, taking care of students, running administrative work in university. So the immediate thing, like, a lot of people wanted to know is that, do you take care of your family too? So do you have time for your family too? That I think that this is actually a gender stereotyping and an issue, because I don't see this question being asked that often and that regular, like, to my colleagues, like, the other researchers or scientists, like, top scientists, like, which are men. There is always this, like, perception or expectation, I would say the society as expectation, particularly when we are in Asia or the Eastern culture, that a lot of emphasis to take care of family, the one that care for the family, care for the children, the full responsibility or the duty is always, like, on women. So that's why when I answer the question, I always say that I am still single, because the following question usually is, like, are you married? How many kids you have? So I would say that I'm single. So I do not have kids. And then the response usually will be, oh, no wonder. So that's why you do not need to take care of the family, and you can rise, like, in your and give full support and effort in your career. That's why you could rise as a leader. So of course, like, the meaning behind it is that if you have a family, then you probably would not be able to consider as a leader, or if, like, you really rise the ladder, like, take the ladder up, and probably the next question is that you probably have abandoned your family. So the expectation is always there. So the support, like, is not really there for women. So I think a lot of this scenario is all like, due to gender stereotyping, and is creating like, a message and the environment which is not so friendly, particularly towards like, the willingness of women to take up the leadership position, and also like, the motivation and self-confidence of women in academics, particularly young women in academics when they are in the very beginning of starting their family. So I would like to just like, break the monotonous tone, like, to bring you all like, to participate in this Mentimeter. So this is a word count, like, if you could just scan this barcode or type in like, your Google and with this like, link to Mentimeter and answer this question. What are the unique challenges women in academia face? So I've shared a little bit of mine, like, of the expectation, like, to spend time with the family. So what other unique challenges you have faced, like, in your career in so far? So short answer, so you could probably like, type lack of time or like, conflict of commitment and things like that. So we will probably take 1 minute for you to participate. Then we will look at like, your response. Workload. So a lot of you answer workload, promotion delay, emotional stress, not enough time, balance between office, physical attributes. So it seems like, workload and stress came up quite a lot, and emotion, stereotyping, aging, assumed as less capable, married and have children, nurturing, break the shyness, strong views, recognition, energy, work burden. Yeah. So I think like, this is something like, very, very generally like, people would face, like, particularly for women, like it or not, particularly for young women in the early 30s or late 30s or early 40s. So the young women in science is actually like, starting off like, your young family, giving birth, bearing kids, taking care of like, young baby. So these are all like, the very much of, I think, the nature, the burden, like, that lay on women itself to bear the kids. So to kickstart, like, the career for young women, it's always way, way more challenges comparing to young men in academics. So that is something that we always see. Later on, when I share the statistic of YSN, you would also see like, these actually impact our membership build up, like, the structure, the number of men scientists, like, in Young Scientists Network, and how we actually like, strategize, like, to correct the situation over here. Okay, so workload is one of it. So let us stop over here and I will go back to my slide. So this is one of the very interesting what is it, slide or sharing, or the findings, like, from a study on comparing how male and female and entrepreneurs are actually described by the venture capitalists. And I find it very, very interesting, as you could see, like, how people comment and view between male entrepreneur and also female entrepreneur, the words that's being used, like, to describe. So you can read over here. The average male entrepreneur is always described with attributes like, such as young and promising. But when it comes to female entrepreneur or the female counterpart, it's young but inexperienced. So it's actually like, almost meaning the same thing, promising, but the female is always like, the negative part is being highlighted and being magnified. So put under the lens, like, inexperience. Arrogant, but very impressive competence. So for female, it will be lack network contacts and in need of help to develop her business concept. So, and a lot more that you can see. Aggressive in men is good. So aggressive, but a really good entrepreneur. So, but for female is like, enthusiastic, but weak. So experienced and knowledgeable in men, experienced, but look worried, like, in female. So based on my own experience, I do think that this is also happening in academic world. Even I myself, like, have experienced this many times, that people put on a different lens when they look at female leaders, particularly or in the or in the academic. So a lot of time people would have this gender stereotype. Oh, another women leaders. So women leaders always talk a lot and do not that much. Nagging, or being too aggressive and too bossy. So, but when it comes to men, so they do not have this type of like, negative attributes like, being put on men. So all of these gender stereotypes, a lot of time, it actually create a very toxic environment and discourage like, young women particularly to step up and to take up like, the leadership position. Rather, a lot of the female academics are being told like, you should stay low and just do the job and listen and follow. So followers is actually one of the role being expected to play by female or women in academics, not just in academic, but in many different fields. So these are some of the very common stereotype being always like, associated with gender. So no matter it is in Asia or in Europe or in US, whether it's developed country or underdeveloped country or developing country. So it seems to be like, quite generally the same, cutting across. So like the word always associated with women, like, preparing food. So cooking is the work of like, female. Being weak, being sweet, so being emotional, so or being wild, or being just like, or follow the step, like, very rigid. But when come to men, so it'll be ambitious, like, be very rational, strong, and so on and so forth. When come to academic, so a lot of people say like, in Malaysia particularly, so I get this question. I think in Malaysia, we are okay. So there's no problem at all. In fact, we should look into having more men in the academic. So gender balance, gender bias is not the issue over here because we have more women. When you come to university, you always see more female lecturers, women researchers, women scientists. But is that true? So according to literature, like, Carnes et al. Actually mentioned, gender bias operates in personal interaction, evaluation process, and also departmental cultures to subtly yet systematically impede women's career advancement. So this is also, I find it quite true, like, even in Malaysia ecosystem, in university, very subtly, so you do not see very obvious like, gender bias, but it does happen. So in such a way that it's actually like, impeding women's career advancements. So I believe that in the morning, so you have already got the statistic of these like, women academician in IPTA. So this is based on the Higher Education Ministry report in 2020, in which like, it is true that the number of female academics like, in IPTA is very high, which is 56.5%, comparing to male like, 43.5%. So based on just these numbers, so a lot of us think that there is no problem at all because we have way more female academics in IPTA when we compare this number with the average number internationally, the global average number of female academics in the university. When we compare this number with the UK, with the US, it seems like, we do not have a problem at all. In fact, the bias that we are seeing over here is not the bias towards women, but the bias towards male, that we should actually do more to bring more men into academics, into university. But when we talk about gender equality and equality, it's not just about number itself. Looking at the number that we are balanced, like, close to 50-50 or slightly more, it doesn't mean that we do not have a gender issue over here. So this is something to look at, like, what is the role that female academics play in the system itself. So we must say that most of the those female representatives, like, within those the level, the administrative level, the leadership position, who can make decision, who can create more influence, particularly in the level of associate professor and professor. You could look at this number over here. Female representation, despite the number of female academics is higher, but the percentage of associate professor and professor is actually way less compared to the men in academics. So there are only 48.4% of female are the associate professor, while for professor is way lower, which is 34%. And we are only looking at this number in IPTA. We are not even looking at the number of the leadership position, administrative position in the university, like deans and deputy vice chancellor and chancellor. How many female vice chancellor that we could see in the public university in Malaysia? The number is actually pretty low. So when compared to more female academics in IPTA. So this is actually a problem that we need to work on it right now. So although that the scenario in Malaysia are slightly better, because at least we have the number in the academic when compared to UK, US, it's so difficult to get female academics into the system itself. We are one step ahead, at least, like, that we need to look into the leadership position for women in academics. So what about among young scientists, like, among the young people over here? Do we see more women or less women? So this is something that we could see over here for Young Scientist Network. So we do have, the maximum age that you could actually join. So for YSN, so you could apply to be a member or affiliate below 40 years old. Okay, so it means that if this year you are 40 years old, you can still apply to be a member or affiliate. So your term will be 3 years. So means that the oldest, like, members and affiliate with YSN is actually 43 years old. So of all of these, like, young academics, like, that join YSN. So this is our distribution of the members and affiliates. So you could clearly see that for members, the female members, we have only 43%, which is way less compared to our male members, which make up 57% of the total number of members in YSN. So there are two mechanisms that you can join YSN, which is through full membership or through affiliateship. So to become a member, we will do selection. So means that it will actually be based on academic performance, how many papers you have published, how much grants you have, how many students you have, and so on and so forth, how many, what is your age index. So those will be the academic performance that we will first screen before you are being called for an interview, that we will look into your leadership characteristics, your attitudes, your mindset, and so on and so forth. So that is how we actually accept members. Based on my experience, so in the first beginning step, like, of screening based on academic performance, a lot of female researchers or scientists would not be able to make it through the threshold, the minimum threshold that we have set for our members. So therefore, those that being invited for interview generally are lower in terms of the ratio for women researcher over here. So whereas for affiliateship, we do not actually look into the academic performance that much, but rather we focus very much in sharing the platform with the early career researchers, those who have probably just started their career and may not have reached the academic level to actually join us. So they need to be sponsored or nominated by members to join YSN. So we have almost 50-50 of members and affiliates within YSN. So means that we have about the total number right now for YSN is 200 members plus affiliates. So about 100 of them are actually affiliates. So for affiliates, we actually see way more women, which is 61% of them are women and 39% of male. We do see very, very high amount, a lot of female applicants who wanted to become affiliate of YSN when academic performance is not one of the matter or one of the criteria for us to do the screening. So just based on their mindset, their leadership and also willingness to contribute, so a lot of female researchers are being selected as affiliates. So as you can see, by having members and affiliate, now we have overall of 53% of female and 47% of male over here. So in fact, for affiliateship, for this new membership, it was only started during Prof. Abi's time, which is 5 years back. So when we realized that the number of female scientists within YSN is actually way too low, and we need to create something so that we could share the platform with more women scientists in Malaysia. So this is really a very good step to bring up the number of women scientists and to share the platform so that they could also grow and excel. So within YSN, we do create a lot of platforms and also the ecosystem, the environment, which is very female or women friendly. For example, so we have our colloquium every year. So our colloquium is participated by all the members and affiliates. So we do understand that a lot of women scientists, they have just started their young family and they have children and babies. So we do encourage all the women scientists to bring their kids to join our colloquium. So that's why during the colloquium, you will be able to meet the second generation of young scientists within us. And during the event, so you will hear babies screaming and crying. And it's actually quite a very friendly environment, to encourage, women scientists that you do not need to be ashamed and shy, that you need to take care of your babies, and you may not have 100% of attention on the work that they do, but they actually be able to show the ability to take care of both the family and the work itself. So we do not see differences in terms of capability between male members and also female members. Both could lead and both could do very good job in completing and pushing for programs within YSN. So this is our executive committee. Just now, Prof. Abi showed you, all the different photos, within the different boards, of all the men representative only without women. So we are very, very proud, at least, within Young Scientists Network Malaysia. So this is something that we do not need to consciously telling people, please select women as your leaders within our executive committee. So we generally, every year, this is something, a culture that's already been embedded within YSN, that we would generally consider both genders, and there's no stereotyping that is happening within YSN over here. So based on this executive committee, this is the new board, for YSN for this year. So you could see that we have almost 50-50 of men and women. So within YSN and within our board over here, and to be put up as leaders and being given like, the platform and the stage to shine as a leader as well. So just over the time, like, after I took over the YSN, the position, the leader as like, YSN chair from Prof. Abi. So to be frank, I really feel like, the pressure and the stress as like, as the first, like, women chair of YSN. So what do I need to do, like, to be a competent chair and efficient chair over here? So I would like to say that I've actually learned quite a lot, and there are a lot of self-reflection over the time, how to be a leader and how to stand up, like, as a good leader over here that we could see. So this is some of my observations. So it could be more, but this is something that I feel that is important to be highlighted over here. So in terms of the key factors and determinants to rise as a women leader in academic, I believe that I think we can look into it in 3 elements over here, which is the motivation, the 1-2 factors, the abilities, and also the opportunities. So the 2 things, like, that we look at the motivation and the abilities is that, like, that I want to be a leader and I can be a leader. So these 2 are the internal factors that we need to target on ourselves, the young women ourselves. So the opportunity is the external factors, but all of these are very, very much like, interrelated. So when we talk about, so many times, like, when we have discussion with Dato Asma or with, like, Abi Pon Hazami, so a lot of time these criteria is being put up. A lot of young scientists, not just like, women scientists, they are lack of self-confidence. So the imposter syndrome is strong. This is particularly the case, like, for women young scientists. So this has something to do with, like, the motivation and the abilities. Since, like, Prof. Abi has already mentioned so much about the structural barrier that we see in the ecosystem itself. So a lot of time, like, to change the ecosystem is not something that you can change overnight, that it will happen immediately. So it will take time, like, and it's a collective effort. All of us need to play a role to change the ecosystem. But there's something immediate that we could do to change the scenario, as like, the concluding slide Abi also mentioned, that it need to start from us. Like, we need to change our attitude. If, like, you can't or immediately already change the environment. So this is something that we as the young women need to start first. Start from ourselves, like, to change our attitude and the way that we could rise as a leader. So in terms of motivation and abilities, and later on we look at opportunity. So before I go further, so this is another Mentimeter that I would like you to take part. So how do you identify yourself? Do you see yourself as a leader? So I will share a story, like, after this, not story and encounter, like, after this. But I would like you to probably take part in this one. How do you identify yourself? Do you see yourself as a leader? A, yes, I'm a leader. B, maybe. C, I'm not yet a leader, but I want to be a leader. And D, I will never be a leader. I just want to do my job. So probably just a very fast one, like, 1 minute, 2 minutes or so.
I know.
Okay, so I think we have probably almost everyone answered. So let us just look at the finding over here, which is every time when I do this is almost the same similar result I see. I'm very happy to see that at least we have 27% of young women over here, young scientists over here saying that yes, I'm a leader. Very, very definitely and with very certain voice, yes, I am a leader. But there are always more people more participants will always say I'm not yet a leader, but I want to be a leader, or I will never be a leader. I just want to do my job and I want to survive in the ecosystems. I want to fulfill the KPI. So that's what a lot of women in academics would actually say. So even if you go around and chit chat with some young women scientists, young women in academics, you generally get the same feedback. This is totally different, when you do the survey, among the men in academics or men researchers or scientists, that a lot more of them will say that, yes, I am a leader, or I will be a leader. So in a very assertive tone. So as per se. Okay, so I will stop sharing over here. So the first thing we want to look in all of this is the motivation to lead. So a lot of young women in academics, they do not have much motivation to lead. When talk about leadership position, taking up a role as the head of department or the head of center, so the comment are always I'm not good enough for it, or I don't think I have time for it, I don't think I'm good enough to go for it, or I think there are actually better people and I don't think I'm qualified to take up the leadership position, even though the invitation has been given, even though you may have reach out to them to invite personally. Research actually show that we are not any different compared to the international world, the other country, that women shows generally lower effective motivation to lead and lower power motivation. So a lot of women will tell you, I don't care about power, it's not something important to me. What I care more is about my family and probably my health and myself. So this is actually quite true over here. So just one encounter that I want to probably share with all of you over here. As my term as the chair of YSN is ending very soon, this year, and we are in the process of selecting for a new chair of YSN. So it's almost a practice within academic science that we will actually nominate 2 men and 2 women as candidate, to stand in for the interview and to be appointed as the next chair of YSN. So I have no problem at all in nominating 2 men young scientists to stand in for the selection as the chair of YSN. So the moment that I approach them, so I think you are qualified and has a lot of potential to be the next chair of YSN. So the response I get from them is very immediate, almost immediate. Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, and yeah, thank you for your nomination, and I am very interested, so I want to go for it. So that is almost the very standard response from the men researchers or scientists over here. But up until right now, I have problem getting one more women scientist to be nominated as the next chair of YSN. So it took me a long time to really talk and invite them out, sit down, have a lunch, have a chit chat to say, oh, I would like to nominate you. So but the immediate response that I always get is, are you sure that I can take up the position? What is the commitment like? I don't think that I have time, and I don't think that I'm good enough. I don't think that I can do the job like, that well. I think the expectation is too high, like, for me to take up the position. There's even like, I need to probably discuss with my husband. So I probably need to think like for 1 week or so. So, and after that, they will come back. I don't think I want to go for it. I don't think I will get it because I'm not qualified. So even though I could be interviewed, but I'm so worried, so afraid, so panicked, like, to be interviewed because I don't think I'm qualified compared to the other nominee over here. So this is very, very common, even though like, when we look at like, their performance all this while running the leadership criteria, the leadership quality, the activities that they run, the ability that they are able to influence, to communicate with the other scientists, to run programs. And when we look at like, the academic performance is equally well, of course it's not top, but it's good, okay? But they do not have the self-motivation. They do not have the self-confidence over here to step in and to take up the position as the leaders over here that we like to see. So of course, a lot of this reason is due to the ecosystem that has been created, the gender stereotype, like, that's go on, like, for so long. And a lot of time, like, within women itself, like, they are the one also practicing, like, gender stereotyping that women are not as good over here. Even like, they would like to believe that they are good, but they always have the voice, like, within them to say that I am not that good. So this is particularly true, like, within the academic environment or the system, as I think Abi has pointed out also, the boys club. So the implicit leadership theories, like, could explain, like, most of it over here. So when you look at these two pictures, so immediately, like, if you ask, like, who could be the next, like, CEO of the company, or like, or to take up, like, the top leadership position of a university, I believe that a lot more people would say that the man looks to be more convincing. So looks to be strong and be able to drive and be able to influence and to get everyone intimidated and listen to him so that they can move things. Whereas, like, on your right hand side, like, the women probably looks to be a bit too soft, too feminine, and too sweet to hold the position. So she may not have, like, the capability to influence, even though she might look very clever and very smart, but she probably doesn't have the power because she doesn't look strong enough. So the women need to man up to take up the leadership position. So generally, like, people have, like, a set of expectation how leaders should look like. And this generally set the tone and limits the potential of young women, particularly, to step in and to take up the leadership position and to grow because of, like, this image and this perception. So be it, like, for a man or a woman. So a lot of people have certain image of how leaders should look like. So that's why, like, even though, like, the minute I took up, like, the position as the chair, so a lot of people would give me this advice: you need to be stronger. You need to look more fierceful. So you need to probably smile less and be more assertive, like, tell people off, like, no, I want this. So this is what I want, rather than having, like, a more softer tone, a tone of, like, let's discuss, let's sit down and talk about it. So they see this quality as something not so fit as a leaders over here. So this is a general, like, perception people has, or the society people has, like, towards leader. And this is particularly the case, like, in the academic world. And therefore, those people, like, being a male and being having a certain type of look and criteria or characteristics, like, it will make them easier or to rise up as a leader over here as compared to women. So that's why you would be able to see, like, some of the women, like, when they become or forced, like, to be more aggressive, like, or to be more fierceful. So then you see in the newspaper, like, no wonder, like, whoever is, like, afraid because too fierceful, but not the word, like, aggressive, overly aggressive. So something like that. So this is something really like, intimidating and stopping like, young women to actually take up the position. But before we actually go further, when we talk about leadership, so we really need to understand what is leadership. So leadership, like, in 1922 and leadership in 2022 is definitely something very different. So it's no longer the time, like, of masculinity, like, that being a leader, you need to look very strong and act in a certain way. So nowadays, we are pushing for transformational leadership. So leadership, when we talk about leadership, leadership is about the art of getting people like, to do things or to move towards like, a similar shared goal and vision. So that benefits everyone. So that's about leadership, the ability to lead, the ability to influence, and the ability to convince people to do things together, so collectively. So that's transformational leadership. So how we actually get to that step is like, is the style, how to do it. So transformational leadership is the one that being put forward to do things like, collectively. So for YSN, like, our vision actually like, is to be a young transformational leader in SDIE for a progressive, harmonious, prosperous, and sustainability society nationally and also internationally. So we stress a lot on transformational leader because we are not looking at like, just one leader, but collective leadership as we could see over here. So when we look at like, collective leadership, then a lot of criteria, like, the feminine criteria within a women leaders play an important role over here, being persuasive, like, being very empathetic, like, be able to listen to other people, and we do decision together rather than one people. So when we talk about transformational leadership, so what is it? So we are talking about creating an inspiring vision for the future and to motivate and inspire people to engage with that vision. Manage and deliver of the vision and coach and build a team to achieve the vision and goal. So a lot of focus has been put like, on building the team, leading the team as a group to achieve a shared vision. So everyone doing one thing at the same time so that we could actually achieve that goal and that vision. So that is what transformational leadership is about. So it's not about shouting and being strong and being loud in the meeting that people listen to you, people get intimidated. But it's more of like, a softer environment that a lot of women would find it like, more comforting, like, comfortable to be in. So the next thing, like, after we talk about we ourselves, like, having the motivation to take up the position. So the next thing, like, that we need to target is like, can I do it? So do I have the ability? What is the skills? What are the qualities, like, to be a leader? So what I want to say over here is like, leadership skills being shared over here. So it's not about women, not about just for young women itself, but for all the young scientists, young academics, like, including men. So some of the listed, like, good leadership skills, I'm not going to go deep into each of it because it's quite a general one and quite a common one, and it makes a lot of sense, like, to look at the list over here. So be a good listener and communicator. So this is one of the main, I put it like, top because this is one of the most important leadership skill that we need to have today. The modern leaders, the transformational leaders need to have, which is a good listener and communicator at the same time. So we need to listen. Only then we will be able to communicate and make decision. And we will need to be able to listen. Only then we'll be able to influence and lead one big team of people to achieve, like, one shared vision over here. So having open-minded and broad-minded is the next thing. Very inspiring and empowering, like, your groups, the other young leaders, like, to come up, give rooms, give the platforms is very important. So when we talk about, like, the volatile, very competitive and changing world today, so as a leader, you need to be able to adapt very fast and be very agile. Self-learning is something that I will talk about later on, which I myself find it very, very helpful in my journey as a young leader over here. And of course, like, you know, being accountable and integrity is a very, very basic and common thing that I do not need to, like, you know, stress a lot more about it. But what I want to stress, like, you know, in the box over here that you see is something that as a women or young women, like, you know, in academics, I find that a lot of us are probably lacking and probably need to do a little bit more, like, you know, to increase our self-confidence, to do our self-motivation, increase our confidence, and to have the courage, like, you know, to voice out and to make decision over here. So of course, like, you know, the courage would come with the self-confidence. Without the self-confidence, you would not be able to have the courage to voice out and to make the decision and take accountable, like, you know, be accountable for the decision being made over here. So be independent. So this is something that we ourselves, like, you know, need to do. So how to get self-confident, how to have self-confidence over here, how to have the courage. I would very much, like, you know, talk about it later on, that we need to have a support network and how we could go for it. So just now, like, you know, Prof. Abi also mentioned about the science leadership program. So this is a little bit about the skills, like, you know, that we cover within the science leadership training or program over here. So as you could see, like, you know, that we talk very much about collective leadership. This is something that everyone or probably the world is doing. And having effective collaboration and network building, creative and system thinking, problem solving, communication skills, stakeholder engagement skill, overcoming cultural inhibitions, and also, like, you know, have the skills in monitoring and assessment of programs or the leadership impacts over here. And what I have highlighted over here, the effective collaboration and networking building, the communication skills, and also the stakeholder engagement skills are actually, like, you know, one of the most important criteria I myself feel that that a leader must have is the communication skills. So when we talk about communication, be able to convince your stakeholder, be able, like, you know, to communicate with your team, you need to have, like, you know, communication skill. So a good communication skill is actually a core leadership function and a key characteristic of a good leaders. So with, like, you know, the transformational leadership being put forward, so communication is one of the main thing, because you need to communicate with your team, you need to communicate your idea properly. So for a lot of, like, you know, young women, this is something that a lot of I would say a lot of women scientists, women in academics, like, you know, feel quite intimidating to do, which is, like, you know, to communicate and to speak up, like, you know, or voice out, particularly during the meeting itself, like, you know. So when we go around and ask people why is it a problem, like, you know, in communicating, a lot of people will tell you that, like, you know, I have idea, I know what needs to be done, but I do not know how to put it together so that I could express it clearly to the crowd. So that's where, like, you know, the skill, the training that you need to get, like, you know, to communicate your idea properly. So when we talk about, like, you know, the communication skill, like, you know, very briefly very briefly, like, you know, we will just put it forward. These are some of the things that you need to do to be a good communicator. You need to be a good listener. You need to have empathy, open-mindedness, and non-judgmental, like, you know, Prof. Karen has mentioned earlier on, non-judgmental, being very confident, like, you know, when you communicate your idea, give response and also give feedback, have very clear mind, like, you know, and be able to think critically when people ask you questions. So how would you like to put your idea together? So you need to have a clear mind over here. Okay. So again, like, you know, you see on the top over here is always good listener. So you need to be able to listen. And what I want to say is that being a female, being a woman, we are naturally born to be a good listener. So we always listen. So be very proud of yourself, like, you know, at least this is something, like, you know, on our side, we are a good listener and we always show empathy. Because we are good listeners, so we will be able to show empathy over here. So Finally, we come to the last one. Of course, the ability, the skill, everything, there are a lot more we need to look into. But this is something very, very important that I wanted to stress a little bit more, on opportunity. So a lot of you say, yeah, I know that self-confidence is very important, but how do I gain self-confidence? So when I am in an environment that there are a lot of limitation, a lot of barriers, and in a toxic environment whereby probably men are being seen as leaders and women are always seen as a weak counterpart that are not able to support the vision of the whole institution. So one thing that I have learned throughout is that self-reflection. So if you want to get self-confidence, you need to know yourself very well, what I am good at and what I am not good at. Of course, not magnifying what you are not good at and feel ashamed and feel shy, I'm not good here. So that's why I cannot rise as a leader. But thinking of ways how could I improve? So knowing yourself, understanding yourself is always the first step, if you want to be a leader, you need to do. So look into really sit down, think about yourself, talk to people, what I'm good at. So a lot of us, we always are harsher on ourselves. We always rate ourselves way lower when compared to other people. So you need to do this exercise, talk to people. So sit down, think about yourself, list down what I'm good at, what I'm not good at, and what I need to do. After you have list down, so you want to talk to other people, your peers, your supportive counterpart, do you think I'm this type of people? Or what do you think about me? So what I could improve. So put in a way so that you could also listen to more voices around you, so that you could see yourself in the mirror, not in your own mirror, but other people's mirror to reflect you more clearly. So a lot of time, you think that you are not good at doing something, but actually people rate you very, very highly for that criteria or for that characteristic that you will be very, very surprised that, oh, I didn't know that I'm good there. Okay. So that is the self-reflection that we need to do. So how we do the self-reflection, you need to have self-learning process and also very strong peer support over here. I always say that do not listen to the toxic comments that go around you. If you find that you are in a toxic environment, so you need to get yourself out. So you need to get the correct peer support over here. That is also one of the reasons why YSN was actually established, which is to provide the peer support which is required by the young academic or young scientists over here. So throughout the time, of course, getting the support that you need, getting the comments and the feedback, a very good advice that you need to have the awareness and also the motivation to improve. So you need to always do self-learning. So I would say that within these 2 years, I've done a lot of self-learning and improved myself so much. So by realizing what is my weakness and what I need to do next, and getting support, positive support, to really improve myself. For example, I'm very good friend, with Prof Abi over here. So he always give me very, very good advice and support. And he's very frank in telling me, I think you should not do this. Or I think you could do better in this way. So I also do the same thing, to Prof Abi. So this is what we call peer support. Get yourself in a network that you actually feel very comfortable with, that you would be able to gain your self-confidence rather than being put down and feel more demotivated. So that is the motivation that we talk about, the network. Why is it important, to join network and not to be staying alone, at a corner. So that's something for young women, need to do if you do not have the confidence. So be very confident. You need to have trust in yourself, how to do it. So build your networks and your friendship. So if you do not have one currently, come join YSN. So you will find a lot of friends, a lot of support, within YSN and over the time. So you would learn to be a good leader and you will get so motivated, and that in that way, so you will build your confidence. Of course, what I want to say is that in the current world, like, you know, that's always changing, that is so volatile, so competitive, you must not stop learning. So while I say, like, you know, that being confident is good, but not overconfident. So always, like, you know, have that alertness, like, you know, within ourselves that there's something that I do not know, and there's something that I always need to improve myself. So there's always, like, no weakness within us, and there's no shy and ashamed to admit that we are not 100% and we are not good enough, and we need to continue to improve. Okay. So, and lastly, what I want to say is that don't wait for the change to happen. So the ecosystem will not change immediately. So the ecosystem, like, you know, that we think is ideal over here, like, you know, for women to grow, may not come in another 10 years, in another 20 years, but we ourselves need to be the change. Only when you have changed, you can change the ecosystem. If we ourselves do not change, then you do not hope for the ecosystem to change. So always start from ourselves, and always, like, you know, find ways, like, you know, reach out for help, reach out that you the support that you need. So if you think that you need more support over here, so don't sit quietly at the corner and cry yourself. Go out, reach out, look for the support, and there are always, like, you know, huge group of support, a lot of platforms available that you would be able to gain your confidence. You will be able to get the support to grow together. Okay, so that's all I wanted to share over here, and that sum up the main message that I wanted to share. Okay, thank you.
I share, I want to be an information. Please talk. Go ahead. Hello. Well, the world is now we have it's very still.
I think Dr. Wan Fatma, I cannot hear you. You are breaking up. Yeah.
Ching.
Slightly better.
Okay. Because in okay now I'll from the King.
I cannot hear. Probably, like, you know, if any of you could just ask question directly, better.
Yes.
Can I ask you?
Sure.
Oh, all right. So this is the situation. So when we have some sort of what we call it a self-confidence, you know, to voice out our opinion, and then I received some sort of a weird perception about others. So in this kind of situation, how we are going to manage that? I really appreciate your opinion about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zelina. So I think, like, you know, I have, like, you know, also, like, you know, quite frequent, like, you know, encounter with something like this. So when you voice up, like, you know, your opinion, so probably, like, you know, even before, like, you know, you could finish, like, you know, you are being stopped by people. Oh yeah, it's okay, we understand what you wanted to ask. Or, like, you know, oh yeah, let's, like, you know, talk about this one. So it's a very, very common scenario, like, you know, to see particularly, like, you know, for female leaders, like, you know, within a board with full of male. So the respect, like, you know, is not there. And also, like, you know, the perception that whatever you ask is not important. So it's like, you know, whatever being called, like, you know, silence the voice of, like, you know, female, what is it, academics, like, you know, within the board over here. So I myself, like, you know, always have these, like, you know, of course, like, you know, your emotion will get, like, you know, disturbed during that time. So I think that the thing is, like, you know, you need to, first thing that I always do is, like, you know, I will either, like, you know, step in after this, like, you know, to complete my question or to say what I want to say. So depending on the scenario, of course, like, you know, what's happening within there. So the thing that you need to tell yourself is that, like, you know, it is something to be expected, and you should not blame yourself and feel ashamed that oh yeah, he stopped me because like, I'm not good enough, like, then I feel shy and ashamed. So whoever get me to be ashamed is like, that one, like, who actually stopped you. So a very good leaders, like, within the team, of course, like, is to have, like, strong support over here who would be able to, like, step up to say that, hey, listen, like, and let people, like, finish the thing. So to immediately, like, start the culture, like, for people to do something like this is actually you yourself also need to probably step in, like, if people, like, stop other people from talking. So you say, oh yeah, let's, like, listen, if you are the leader or the chair, like, within the meeting itself. So for me, when I chair, like, YSN meeting of the EXCO board, so it's always, like, the case over here also, to always, like, create that safe environment and for other people to talk. So that is actually one of the culture that need to be practiced, like, over here. So something we say. And the second thing is that you need to be very open about what you feel to other people. So I don't think that this is a good practice, like, to be practiced or started over here. But one thing that, like, to be very realistic is that, like, it's not often the case that you can do that, like, within a meeting, particularly when you are being stopped. But it's always good, like, to bring it after this, like, to really raise it up probably, like, privately, like, to the chair or to that person, like, who actually stopped you. So maybe, like, that person just, like, doesn't do it purposely. So it's unintentionally, like, getting too excited or something like that, like, that people stop you. So you need to express, like, what you think your real feeling, and no need to feel, like, ashamed and yeah, it's my fault or I'm not good enough. So that is the courage, like, that we need to have, like, to really, really voice up what I think. So I think you have done this and I don't feel comfortable within the meeting, and this need to be stopped. Okay, so that is my advice. So I perhaps, like, for myself, I won't do it, like, directly in the meeting, but I will do it, like, at the side. So to approach, like, oh yeah, you stopped me just now, so actually this is what I wanted to say, and I think, like, I feel shocked that you stopped me halfway and things like that. So it's something like, probably a softer approach, like, could be taken over here, rather than to start the fight, like, within the meeting itself. Of course, if you are confident enough and you think that this is too much and you needed to stop this, like, practice immediately, you have the courage, you have the support to do it, do it.
Breaking. Okay, you hear?
Dr. Wan, Fatma, cannot hear you.
Okay.
Cannot hear you.
Much. Thank you for the input and your talk. We enjoy the session. So, if no question, on the doctor, uh, the one, uh, doctor, the person of give. Can you guys hear me?
You're breaking up also, sorry.
Okay, I'm so sorry. Mm. Okay. Can you guys Is it still? Hello, everyone. Is still breaking? Is still breaking? Is it clear?
Yeah, better.
Yes,
Okay,
loud and
okay,
clear.
Better.
okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Chai,
Yes.
for your sharing sessions and for your valuable inputs and your talk. If there's no more question now, I think I shall end the Q&A sessions for Dr. Chai. And now I shall invite Dr. Thien Lei Mee, the program coordinator, for her speech.
Thank you, Miss MC. Can you all hear me now? Is it clear?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Thanks. Thank you very much. So I would like to express my appreciation to the speakers for their valuable contributions to our webinar entitled Women in Higher Education, Advancing Leadership in UKAWA. My deepest gratitude goes to all who participated in the webinar and helped to make it a success. The knowledge sharing from the speakers has provided a better understanding of women in higher education, mainly in three perspectives. Understanding women leaders' well-being in higher education, equity and equality in higher education, young women in academic leadership. There were 10 interesting points that we can took from this webinar. Leadership merit both of your professional life and your personal life. Well-being is about psychological well-being and happiness. Find a balance between the two. Life satisfaction is the determinant of one's well-being. Mindfulness refers to flexibility of the mind, paying attention, participating, and ensuring well-being can flourish. Encouraging work-life balance and use work-life flexibility benefits in sharing housework and childcare equally. Implementations of measures in fostering gender equity in management, leadership, and positions. Leadership in women must possess self-confidence and courage to make the decision. And also, the key determinants to be women leaders in academia include motivation to lead, abilities, and opportunities. I just would like to add one point here, additional from what has been raised out by the third speaker. Leadership is not only context specific, but also cultural specific. Yeah. So all these points could provide insights for recommendations related to women in higher education in enhancing and supporting the national women policy, the Women Development Action Plan, Shared Prosperity Vision 2030, Rancangan Malaysia ke-12, and Strategic Focus in Higher Education. Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome further conversation with the guest speakers and participants about a possible publication on women in higher education. For those who are interested in publishing research in this domain, feel free to inform us. Before ending my closing remarks, my deepest thanks, of course, reserved for the organizer, honorable guests and speakers of this webinar, AKEPT, Ministry of Higher Education, PPIP and IPPTN USM, and also the staff who work very, very hard for this webinar. And I would like to say a big thank you for the commitment and contributions to ensure the success of this webinar. With this, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Thien.
Thank
So
you.
to all the participants, please complete the survey form for the e-certificates and for the USM staff for the CPD points. So the QR codes will be shared in the last slide and the link will be shared in the chat box. Lastly, on behalf of the organizing committee, I would like to thank all the honorable speakers, guests, participants for participating in our webinar today. Hope you had a great time. Thanks again, everyone.